You heartless monster. You have no heart or feelings or love. Prison is too good for you. This is hard to say, but may God have mercy on your soul.
We loved you like a son. We trusted you. Your faithful wife trusted you. Your children adored you.
This is something we will never get over. We will always mourn the loss of our family. I am still struggling to understand how and why this tragedy occurred.
I don't think he will give an honest assessment of why he did what he did, how he did what he did, and I don't think that there is ever going to be a satisfactory answer for anyone.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong.
Eight years of investigators, documentaries, podcasts, and millions of people combing through the same 2,000 pages of discovery evidence. And in all of that time, across all of that scrutiny, one person walked away. She sat across from investigators 6 separate times. She answered their questions. She cried in the right places.
He's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him.
Why? How? I don't even understand how you could, bring yourself to do that to somebody who's, that big.
She even called the police herself. And for 8 years, the world largely accepted the version of events she handed them. But here is what changed in 2026. A man who spent 7 months in the cell directly next to Chris Watts published what he says Watts told him, in private, word by word, conversation by conversation. And when you place what that man claims Chris said next to evidence that was already sitting inside the official discovery file, a picture forms that no documentary, no podcast, and no investigation has ever fully assembled in one place. Until right now, I am not going to walk you through basic timeline of August 13th. You already know it. You have known it for years. What I am going to walk you through is what the evidence shows happened around that morning. Before it, during it, after it, and the one person whose name keeps appearing. In the phone records, in the search history, in the GPS data, in forensic reports, who has never once been made to formally answer for any of it. Stay with me. Because by the time this video ends, you are not going to be asking whether Chris Watts belongs in prison. You are going to be asking a completely different question. And it is a question that 8 years later, nobody in an official capacity has ever been forced to answer. Let me establish the foundation before we go anywhere else, because this matters. Nichol Kessinger was never charged with any crime. She sat for multiple recorded interviews. She handed over her phone. In the official court record, she is classified as a witness. A woman who unknowingly fell for a married man who turned out to be a murderer. That is the official story, and that story has always had problems. Not theory problems, not Reddit speculation problems. Documented, time-stamped, forensically established problems sitting inside the public discovery record that nobody in a position of authority has ever been made to explain. Let us start with what single-handedly dismantles the entire foundation of her account to investigators. Nichol Kessinger told law enforcement, clearly, consistently, across multiple sessions, that she genuinely believed Chris Watts was nearly divorced when their relationship began. She thought the separation was already underway. She believed she was not breaking up a family because the family had already effectively ended. That was her pillar. Her entire defense of her own conduct rested on it.
So I just want to know how you met him, where you met him, how long you guys were dating, and those kind of things initially.
Okay. I think I met him sometime in June, probably early June. It might have been May. It was just talking at work. It was pretty casual. And he didn't have a wedding ring on his finger. And every time I talked to him, he didn't tell me that he was in a relationship. He didn't even mention his kids right away either. And then one day he told me that he had 2 kids. I was like, that's pretty cool. And started telling me about his kids.
That sounded like a sarcastic comment.
No, I thought it was kind of cute. I was like, oh, he's a dad. It was like right around Father's Day too. So whenever that is that in June?
Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm not good with holidays.
he told me he had kids, and then it was Father's Day shortly after
Okay.
that. So that's what I do now. And I was like, I thought it was cute. And then he's telling me about him. He's pretty excited about him. And then he mentioned that he did have a significant other. And then he told me that those 2 were in the process of a separation.
Did he mention the children's name or his significant other's name?
I didn't know his significant other's name for a while. And then I think he told me his kids' names pretty quick, but to be honest with you, on an exact date of when that happened, I don't know. And I just feel like some of this happened so long ago that I can't tell you like the exact words of the exact conversation at the exact time and place, because it's like we had a lot of conversations. I mean, we talked every single day, so it's like I'm trying to help you guys with the stuff, like the stuff that's more current. I can give you guys a lot more like detail and exact times, but when you're asking me about something that happened 6 weeks ago and exactly what was said, it's like, I mean, I'm sure I can give you a general idea, but to be honest with you, like to pinpoint exact words, it's not gonna.
Did you ever give him like books or articles or anything to read about saving your marriage? Did you ever provide anything to him like that?
About saving his marriage?
Yeah, like how to recover a marriage or how to save your marriage. You know, there's all sorts of publications and books out there.
No, but I did tell him, and I don't know if I did this through text or phone. That will be something you guys will, I'm sure, figure out. But I told him a few times, like, I think that you should take the time to read some articles about what separation does to kids.
Now, let us look at what her phone was actually doing. On July 24th, 2018, weeks into their relationship, she searched the following phrase on Google. Man I'm having an affair with says he'll leave his wife. Not man I'm dating who is separated. Not man going through a divorce. Affair. Her word, her search, her phone. You do not use the word affair if you genuinely believe you are dating a man who is mutually and openly separating from his wife. That word only comes from someone who understands they are in the middle of something that is still very much intact. That was July 24th. On August 4th, while Chris was in North Carolina on a family trip that Nichol herself later claimed she had encouraged, she spent 2 consecutive hours searching for wedding dresses online. 2 full hours. On August 8th, Chris still in North Carolina, she searched. Marrying your mistress. Mistress. Again, her language, her search. She knew exactly what she was. Now, hold those 3 searches against this single detail on that same August 4th. The same afternoon she was browsing wedding dresses, she also searched both Chris and Shanann's Facebook accounts. She could see Shanann's page. She could see the pregnancy announcement Shanann had posted publicly. And in all 6 of her interviews with law enforcement, Nichol Kessinger stated clearly that she had absolutely no idea Shanann was pregnant. She said discovering the pregnancy through news coverage was one of the most shocking moments of her life. She said that if she had known about the baby, she would never have been involved with Chris at all. She accessed Shanann's Facebook page on August 4th. The pregnancy had been publicly announced weeks before. She told investigators she had no idea. Now, I want to bring you to the data point that the district attorney's own office confirmed was real, and then never pursued. This is not a rumor. This is not online speculation. This is something Michael Rourke, the Weld County DA who prosecuted Chris Watts, confirmed on record when pressed directly by reporters. Forensic analysis of Nichol Kessinger's phone showed that she was searching Shanann Watts by name as early as January 2018. She told investigators her relationship with Chris did not begin until June 2018. She was searching for Shanann 5 months before she claims to have known Shanann existed. When reporters asked D. O'Rourke whether this data was real, he confirmed it. He stated it came directly from the phone. He said it was not a reporting error. And when asked why that anomaly was never independently investigated, he stated that because Chris Watts pleaded guilty, the investigation did not continue to that point. Stop there. The district attorney of Weld County confirmed on record that a key witness in a quadruple homicide had been searching the victim's name 5 months before she claims to have known the victim existed, and the official response was, "We didn't pursue it because we already had a conviction. That is what is on record." And in 2026, that anomaly sits exactly where it has always been, in the record, unresolved, unexplained. One of the most repeated defenses of Nichol Kessinger has always been this. She came forward herself. She called the police voluntarily. She had nothing to hide. It sounds like the behavior of someone with a clear conscience. Except the sequence does not hold. On August 15th, 2018, 2 days after the murders, CBI agent Tammy Lee received a phone call at 5 in the morning from Anadarko Petroleum's security manager, Tony Husky. He informed investigators that a contracted employee had been exchanging suggestive messages with their primary suspect. He gave them 2 names, Chris Watts and Nichol Kessinger. Law enforcement already knew who she was. Approximately 2 hours after that call, at 9:50 a.m., Nichol Kessinger contacted investigators. She was not being courageous. She was not being transparent. She was getting ahead of something she could already feel closing in. And here is what removes any remaining doubt about that. On that exact same day, the same day she supposedly reached out to cooperate with an active murder investigation, Nichol Kessinger was searching Google for, "Can cops trace text messages? How long do phone companies keep text messages? What is the difference between text message content and text message detail?" And then she deleted every one of those searches. A woman cooperating fully and honestly does not spend her cooperation day researching the boundaries of what law enforcement can find. That is the behavior of someone calculating what they can and cannot hide, and it was not her first round of deletion. Because on August 14th, before she had made any contact with investigators, she had already wiped her phone clean. All text messages, all photos, her contacts, her emails, everything that connected her to Chris Watts, gone. She then instructed Chris to delete everything on his end, and she told her close friend Charlotte, who had received photos of Chris from Nichol along with detailed conversations about him, to delete their entire thread as well. Deleting material evidence during an active homicide investigation has a legal name. It is called obstruction of justice. It was confirmed. It was documented in the discovery record, and when investigators raised it with her directly, when Agent Kobach brought it up in her second interview, Nichol Kessinger's explanation was that she was grossed out by Chris, that she simply did not want his name appearing on her phone anymore. That answer was accepted. The conversation moved on. Now, I need your complete attention, because what comes next is the piece of this case that the evidence has always pointed toward, and that no official investigation ever satisfactorily confronted. Nichol Kessinger drove the same commute to work every single day. Investigators subpoenaed months of her phone records. The cell tower data mapped that commute with total consistency. Same roads, same towers, morning after morning, predictable. Established, uniform, until the morning of August the 13th, 2018. At 6:16 a.m., on the morning the Watts family was murdered, Nichol Kessinger's phone pinged a cell tower it had never once pinged in all those months of prior records. That tower placed her device in the proximity of one specific address, the Watts family home in Frederick, Colorado, the same address she had searched on Google less than 36 hours before. Let me give you the precise timing. Because context is everything. Chris Watts had driven away from that address at approximately 5:45 a.m. that morning. By 6:16 a.m., he was already on the highway, heading northeast toward the Survey 319 oil well site. He was not at the house. He had been gone for 30 minutes. At 6:16 a.m., while his phone pinged towers along the highway, her phone pinged a tower near his house, and she placed a call, not to Chris, to a man named Jim. Jim is not a peripheral figure in this case. Discovery records and subsequent investigative interviews established that Jim was embedded in the social world shared by Chris and Nichol. There are photographs of all three of them together at the Colorado Sand Dunes, one of the locations Chris and Nichol visited during their relationship. Days after the murders, when Detective Kobach asked Nichol whether Jim could serve as her alibi witness, whether he could confirm her location on the morning of August 13th, here is exactly what she said.
We want to show that you were never near him that day, period.
I mean, you guys
So-
can track my stuff.
No, yeah, I mean, that was something we will have to get a warrant for anyways. I'm just saying, if we asked for it, would you have any objections to that?
No, you can have it.
So,
If I'm a pretty boring person, I don't
it sounds
go
like
too
you
many
just went to
places.
work that day and then you came home and you were there at 3:45.
Yeah, like give or
Monday.
take like 5
Yeah,
minutes.
right.
But yeah, so 3:45, I meet Jim there. Yeah, I would
And
totally.
so Jim is understand from an investigative point, he could be a person who could say, yeah, I was there at 3:45. He doesn't know Chris. He doesn't know anything. He could say with one phone call, yeah, she came in at 3:45, done.
Totally.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't have to ask anything more than, hi, Chris, my name's Kevin, or Jim. And I'm not saying you have to go to you.
Just leave Jim
But
alone.
if-
Jim
if
does
at
not need to
some
be wrapped
point-
up in this.
If at some point I needed Jim's info to, let's say we couldn't find your phone records, would you
You
tell
can
me who
have
Jim
them.
was?
I will give them to you.
Would you tell me who Jim was if I
If
couldn't
you
get it?
had to. I don't really want to
Correct.
involve him in this. That is not fair to him. That's not, no, if I do not have to do that.
That's fine.
Her alibi witness, the one person who could confirm where she was on the morning her lover murdered his family. And she said it would not be fair to name him. Detective Kobach did not press her. He moved on. The question of where Nichol Kessinger was between 5:45 and 8 a.m. on August 13th, 2018, was never formally answered in any interview. It was never independently verified through any other means. And this, across the entire run of records reviewed after August 13th, her phone never once pinged that Frederick Tower again. Not on any subsequent morning, not on any workday, not ever. Because she had no reason to be near that house after that day. Anadarko Petroleum had security cameras throughout their facility, including coverage of their parking lot. Footage that could have confirmed exactly when Nichol Kessinger arrived at work that morning was accessible and existed. No publicly verified timestamp from that footage was ever produced. Her time card was referenced by Nichol herself in her first interview. She mentioned when she clocked out. She never mentioned when she clocked in, and no investigator ever asked. Of everything in this case, every deleted search, every unanswered question, every gap in the official record, this is the detail that stops serious case researchers cold. Because this one detail does not have a credible innocent explanation, and it was sitting in the discovery file the entire time. Survey 319 is the Anadarko oil well site where Chris Watts drove on the morning of August 13th. It is where he buried Shanann. It is where Bella and Celeste's bodies were found inside crude oil tanks. It is the crime scene. In Nichol Kessinger's very first interview with investigators, she told them that Chris going to the oil field that morning was routine, normal field operations, nothing unusual. 6 days later, after investigators received her phone records, her account changed completely. Suddenly, She remembered an extensive conversation with Chris the night before the murders, in which she questioned him specifically about why he needed to go to Survey 319 first thing Monday morning. Her documented words to investigators: "That's not your job. Why would you have to go check the release? You're not part of the environmental team." She knew that site. She knew his role. She knew it was not normal. And then she disclosed something that has never received the attention it deserves. On the evening of August the 13th, hours after Chris had been at that location, she texted him asking him to send her a photograph. Photographic proof that he had been at Survey 319 that day. She asked for evidence of his presence at the crime scene on the day the crime was committed. Now, consider the full documented record of their communication. Months of daily contact, texts, calls, exchanges reviewed in detail by investigators. There is not a single other instance of Nichol Kessinger asking Chris Watts to photograph his location on any workday. Not once. Across months of records, except on the one morning he visited Survey 319, except on the day he drove his family there. When this information came up during her interview, when Kobach had that detail in front of him, he did not ask why. He did not ask what prompted a request she had never made on any other day in their entire relationship. He did not ask why Survey 319 specifically, and not any of the other locations Chris visited that same morning. He moved on. A witness in a quadruple homicide tells investigators she requested photographic proof of the primary suspect's presence at what would be confirmed as the crime scene on the day the crime was committed, and the investigator says nothing. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know how deep into this evidence we are, and I want to make sure you stay with me for what comes next. Because what I am about to walk you through in the next 3 sections is what I believe is the most damning sequence in this entire case. Not the phone ping, not the wedding dress searches, not even the Survey 319 photo request. What comes next is the documented record of what happened on the night of the murders, and the calls made in the hours that followed that no official investigation ever formally confronted. Stay with me. The night of August 13th into the early hours of August 14th. Between 9:48 p.m. and 2:18 a.m., the phone records show Nichol Kessinger and Chris Watts in multiple calls totaling 156 minutes, 2 hours and 36 minutes of conversation on the night of the murders. While Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn Nico had been at that oil field for over 12 hours. When Detective Kobach walked Nichol through those calls, reading the timestamps, the durations, asking what was discussed, here is what she offered. I would almost want to come in there and drag and drop all of my texts to where they were going. We may need to do that here, coming early next week. She offered to come in and manually reorganize her own messages to fill the gaps she could not account for verbally. That meeting never happened. She never came back. Now, hold that against this. In those same interview sessions, Nichol provided detailed, specific, chronologically precise accounts of events from weeks and months earlier in the relationship. Specific restaurants, specific dates, specific conversations she recalled with confidence and fluency. Her memory for July was sharp and clear. Her memory for the night of August 13th, the single most important night in the entire case, was, in her own words, fragmented. Memory works selectively when the stakes are selective. But what she did say about that night is more revealing than what she claimed she could not remember. When Kobach pressed her on why she could not sleep, why the calls kept happening through the early hours of August 14th, why she was distressed, she said this. These are her documented words. All those phone calls at the very end of the night. That was me freaking out. I can't sleep. I'm really scared. Where's your family? That was me freaking out, and him calling to try to assure me, just making sure everything was okay. I'm really scared. Where's your family? In her official account to investigators, Nichol stated that she assumed Shanann had simply gone to a friend's house. Couples argue she needed space. She would come back. That was the explanation she gave for why she was not alarmed when Chris mentioned his family was gone. But if you genuinely believe a woman has gone to cool off at a friend's house, there is nothing to be scared of. There is no reason to lose sleep. There is no reason to need reassurance at 2 in the morning that everything is okay. You are only scared at 2 in the morning if you already know, or strongly suspect, that the situation is something entirely different from a couple needing space. And then came the moment that may be the single most damning detail in Nichol Kessinger's entire documented record. At 1:51 a.m. on August 14th, Nichol called Chris. At 1:58 a.m., while they were still on that call, Chris began receiving calls from the Frederick Police Department. They ended their call. Chris called the officer back at 2:05 a.m. on his work phone, and within seconds of that police call beginning, Nichol called Chris's personal phone. Both calls running simultaneously, the investigating officer on the work phone, Nichol on the personal phone, at 2 in the morning, while an officer was beginning to ask questions about where his family had gone. Investigators who reviewed these records noted what the sequence implies. She was listening in, monitoring in real time what the officer knew and what he did not. She has never been asked to explain why she called back at that exact moment. That call, at 2:05 a.m. on August 14th, was the last documented communication between Nichol Kessinger and Chris Watts. Shortly after, she deleted virtually everything from her phone before surrendering it to investigators. Why does someone with nothing to hide call back the moment a police conversation begins at 2 in the morning? Why does someone who believed Shanann simply left to cool down need to know, in real time, what an officer is asking? Those questions are in the record. They have never been answered. In 2026, Dylan Tallman, Chris Watts's former cellmate at Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, released a book series titled The Cell Next Door, containing what he says are direct accounts of conversations he had with Watts during the 7 months they were housed next to each other. I am going to be completely transparent about how I treat this source, because that transparency is what separates this channel from noise. Dylan Tallman is a self-admitted career criminal. His book originates from the words of Chris Watts. Chris Watts is not a reliable narrator of his own life. He is a man who has, in verified prison letters reported by multiple news outlets, compared his life sentence to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, a man who has consistently distributed blame to every woman around him while framing himself as someone who was led astray. Nothing Chris Watts says is accepted here at face value. The only meaningful question when evaluating Tallman's claims is this: does what he reports align with evidence that already existed in the discovery record before his book was ever written? On several specific points, the answer is yes. Tallman writes that, on the night of August 12th, during the 111-minute phone call between Chris and Nichol, she issued an ultimatum. According to Tallman's account, she told Chris directly, "It is your family or me. We cannot independently confirm that conversation took place, but here is what we absolutely can confirm, using only evidence that existed before Tallman published a single word. At 10:33 a.m. on August 13th, 9 minutes after hanging up with Shanann's mother, who had just been told by Chris that Shanann went to a friend's house, Chris Watts opened Google and searched for hotels in Aspen, Colorado. 9 minutes later, he called a mountain resort directly. A man who has just committed 4 murders, who has just fed a cover story to his mother-in-law, who is managing co-workers by text to keep them away from the crime scene, is searching for resort hotels in the mountains. What is the innocent explanation for that sequence? If this crime was driven purely by impulsive rage, as Chris repeatedly claimed in his early interviews, you do not search Aspen Resort hotels 9 minutes after manufacturing a story for your grieving mother-in-law. You only do that if you believe your next chapter has already been arranged. If you believe someone else is managing the rest of the details, if you are not improvising, but executing a plan. Dylan Tallman did not create that hotel search. It was in the discovery file. He arrived on top of suspicion that was already fully documented and fully established. And there is one more thing Tallman recorded that reveals something essential about the man at the center of all of this. In a prison conversation about how the public perceives him, Chris Watts reportedly said, "I wish people would judge me on my whole past, instead of just that one day." That one day. The day he strangled his pregnant wife. The day he drove his daughters to a remote oil field and killed them. He refers to those acts as that one day, a single blemish against an otherwise acceptable history. That is not remorse. That is a man seeking partial credit, weighing years of ordinary fatherhood against a morning of premeditated violence and expecting the arithmetic to come out somewhere in the middle. It will not. Before we reach the final section, this case requires a moment that it consistently does not get. Chris Watts was identified within 24 hours, not because of sophisticated surveillance technology, not because of investigative procedure alone, but because of the women who loved Shanann, and who moved faster than he ever anticipated. Nicole Atkinson had been with Shanann in Arizona on that work trip. She had watched her friend navigate the quiet collapse of her marriage across the entire weekend. She had driven Shanann home from the airport at nearly 2 a.m. on the 13th and stood at the door until she was safely inside. When 9 a.m. arrived and Shanann missed her prenatal appointment, scheduled for testing on her pregnancy with Nico, Nicole did not wait. She did not send another text. She drove to the doctor's office, confirmed Shanann was a no-show, and went directly to 2825 Saratoga Trail. Her son looked through the garage window. He saw Shanann's car. He saw the girl's car seats still inside. Nicola Atkinson called the police, while Chris was at the oil field site managing co-workers by text. Nicole stood on that driveway and refused to move until someone with a badge arrived. She is a primary reason this case broke open in hours rather than days. Cassie, one of Shanann's closest friends, cut through every manipulation tactic Chris attempted with a single response. When he reached out and wrote, "I really don't want you to think I'm a bad person, Cassie," she replied, "Right now, Chris, I don't care about you. I don't care about your relationship or what type of person you are or are not, and I'm not trying to be rude when I say that." She had one question. Where is Shanann? Everything else was noise. And Addie, the moment she got off a phone call with Chris that afternoon, sent a single message to the friend group that stands as one of the most precise things said by anyone in the first hours of this case. The police need to look at Chris's cell phone and his computer. One phone conversation was all she needed. She had read exactly who she was dealing with and named the evidence that would break the case open. She was right. These women compressed the timeline before anyone could finish covering their tracks. Their refusal to accept the explanations being handed to them is the reason evidence existed before more of it could disappear. They have never received the credit this case owes them. Let me lay this out with precision, because this is not a list of theories. This is a documented record of what the official investigation confirmed and then did not pursue. 1. Her phone pinged a cell tower near the Watts family home at 6:16 a.m. on the morning of August the 13th, a tower her phone had never once pinged in months of prior records and never pinged again afterward. No investigator formally asked her to account for this location. No official explanation was ever produced. 2. Less than 36 hours before that ping, she had searched the Watts family home address online. That search was in the discovery record. It was never raised as a direct point of confrontation in any of her 6 interviews. 3. She requested photographic proof of Chris's presence at Servi 319, the crime scene, on the day of the murders. This is documented in discovery. In months of prior records, she had never once asked him to photograph his work location on any other day. The investigator who had this information did not follow up. 4. She spent 156 minutes on the phone with Chris on the night of the murders, calls she could not coherently account for when I was seen interviewed. She offered to come in and manually reorganize her messages to fill those gaps. She never returned. No investigator followed up. 5. She called Chris's personal phone the moment a police call connected on his work phone at 2 in the morning while Shanann was still classified as missing. No investigator ever formally asked her to explain the timing of that specific call. 6. She deleted the entire content of her phone before surrendering it to investigators. The forensic lab report issued by Detective Michael Prill on October 30th, 2018, confirmed in writing that the technology available at the Northern Colorado Forensic Laboratory did not allow for complete data extraction from Apple devices. Hundreds, possibly thousands, of messages were never recovered. Prill made this limitation explicit in his report. He was not speculating about what might be missing. He was documenting in writing, for the record, that the investigation had an irreversible technological ceiling, and that everything sitting above that ceiling would never be seen by anyone. The report was filed, the limitation was acknowledged, and the investigation was declared complete anyway. 7. During one of her interviews, she casually referenced using Skype with Chris, a platform that carries entirely separate message records from a standard phone thread, requiring a separate legal request to obtain. Skype records were never requested. 8. Chris Watts's confirmed use of Snapchat, a platform whose fundamental design auto-deletes messages, was documented inside the discovery file. Snapchat records were never subpoenaed. 9. She had searched Shanann Watts by name as early as January 2018, 5 months before she claims to have met Chris. This was confirmed as real data by DA Michael Rourke on record. It was never independently investigated because Chris Watts entered a guilty plea. 10. The source of the oxycodone Chris used on Shanann, confirmed present in her system by the toxicology report, remains officially unknown. Chris has refused to name the source. He stated it is a secret he will take to his grave. No official investigation has ever answered that question. Those are 10 documented, confirmed, publicly verifiable gaps in an investigation that was officially declared complete. Any one of them, individually, can be rationalized. All 10 together, in sequence, aligned with the timeline of a quadruple homicide, cannot. Chris Watts is 40 years old. He is inside Dodge Correctional Institution in Walpon, Wisconsin. He works as a custodian. He attends Bible study. He writes letters. He is serving 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He will die inside that building. That part of justice is secured, and it is exactly right. Nichol Kessinger changed her name. She left Colorado. She gave one interview to the Denver Post in late 2018, described herself as a victim of Chris's manipulation, and has not spoken publicly since. She was never charged. And here, with absolute precision, is what that means and what it does not mean. DA Michael Rourke made a legal determination that the evidence, as it existed at that specific moment, did not meet the threshold required for prosecution. That is a legal calculation made at a specific point in time. It is not an acquittal. It is not a declaration of innocence. It is a prosecutorial decision made at a specific moment. Before 10 of the documented gaps I just described were ever formally pursued. In his own interview with Investigation Discovery, Rourke described Nichol Kessinger's information as these are his words, bombshell that helped build the case against Chris. He described Chris as appearing to have had every intention of starting a new life with her. That is not the language of a man who believed she had nothing to do with any of it. He said the evidence did not support charging her. He did not say she was innocent. Those are different statements, and the difference between them is exactly where the unanswered questions live. Shanann Watts was 34 years old. She documented her life openly, her marriage, her daughters, her business, her hope, because she believed in what she was building. She was not naive. She was not blind. She knew something was deeply wrong in the weeks before August 13th. She searched for marriage counselors. She ordered a book on rebuilding relationships. She wrote her husband a letter telling him she would fight for them. She did everything a person is supposed to do when the life they love is beginning to fracture. And none of it was enough, because the fracture was not an accident. It was a plan. Bella was 4 years old. August 13th was supposed to be her first day of school. Celeste was 3. Nico never took a single breath outside of his mother. None of them had any say in any of it. The phone records are there, the forensic reports are there, the GPS coordinates are there, the interview transcripts are there. The evidence does not become less true because it remains unacted upon. And it does not become less worth knowing. There is one final piece that belongs here. Detective Michael Prill submitted his forensic data report to the Weld County District Attorney's Office on October 30th, 2018. It was unlike anything else in the entire discovery file. For the first time, someone inside law enforcement was writing in a way that made clear they were no longer fully accepting the narrative Nichol Kessinger had constructed since August 15th. Prill documented her search history in specific detail. He flagged her deletion of critical evidence. He stated with certainty that Chris was communicating with Kessinger through channels beyond what had been examined. He noted the secret calculator application through which images were arriving entirely outside any standard text thread. Images that required a separate investigation to trace. An investigation that never happened. And he described her voicemails and her general affect across the evidence he reviewed, using one specific word, his word, in an official government document. Creepy. That is the word a forensic detective used inside an official report to describe the woman law enforcement had classified as a protected cooperative witness. Now consider the standard legal process. Discovery materials travel from the DA's office to the court, to defense counsel, and then to the defendant. That process typically takes several days. By approximately November 2nd, 2018, Chris Watts very likely had Detective Prill's full report in his hands at Weld County Jail. On November 6, 2018, exactly 1 week after that report was issued, Chris Watts accepted a guilty plea. No trial, no witness testimony under oath, no Nichol Kessinger on a stand being cross-examined by a defense attorney who had read every single word of that discovery file. The case closed. Whether Chris Watts accepted that plea purely to avoid the death penalty, or whether he understood that a trial would force questions into a courtroom that certain people needed to keep out of one, is something only he can answer. But 1 week between that forensic report and that guilty plea is not a coincidence that explains itself. If you stayed with me to the end of this, thank you. I genuinely mean that. I want to ask you 2 specific questions in the comments. I read everything you write first. The phone ping at 6:16 a.m., placing Nichol Kessinger's device near the Watts family home on the morning of the murders. Does that single piece of evidence change how you have understood this case? Second, The 10 documented gaps, the Skype records never requested, the Snapchat subpoena that never happened. The Servi 319 photo request, the alibi witness she refused to name, the January 2018 search for Shanann. Do you believe the investigation was complete? Tell me where you stand. Tell me what landed hardest. Tell me what I missed. And if this video gave you something new, something assembled in one place that you had not seen before, share it. Not for numbers, because these questions deserve to reach more people than they currently have. Subscribe, because next week we go to part 2 of this series. We go deeper into the deleted phone data, the specific interview moments researchers say were never properly followed up on, and what legal options, if any, exist in 2026 when the primary conviction is already secured, but the investigation around it never fully was. We are not finished with this story, not even close. For Shanann, for Bella, for Celeste, for Nico. Justice is not a moment, it is a direction, and we keep moving toward it.
Girls are still in the truck. Okay.
Did they ask you what you were doing, taking mommy out, or?
Yeah, I don't remember what I told them, but they did ask that.
What did they say specifically?
It was more like, what are you doing to mommy?
Right. And then the girls, right? Okay. You mentioned Bella was first. Cece was first, okay. Where exactly was she when it happened?
In the back seat.
Okay. Was she just right next to Bella?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so once again, was it a hand over her face?
It was a blanket over and my hand.
And then your hand. Okay. And then so that just stopped her from breathing type thing? Okay. Did she struggle at all?
I don't think so, but I was blocking her face and my hand was right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had one hand here and one hand over her mouth?
And we're just pushing her against the back of the seat type thing? Okay. What was Bella doing?
She was sitting there next to it. She didn't know what was going on.
Okay. Could she see you? Okay. Tell me about what you were thinking.
I was thinking it's what would happen.
Yeah.
Or any partial hint of what I feel for those girls and what I feel for my wife, but none of this would have happened, so I wasn't thinking.
Okay. So she's in the back seat. Okay. And then once she's gone, then is it Bella next, or did you pull Cece out?
I pulled Cece out.
Okay, so once Cece's gone, Bella's still there in the car alive, and then you pulled Cece out. What did you do with her? Okay. So she went into the tank, and Bella was still in the back of the truck alive. Okay. With regard to that tank, did you bring up Cece, put her down, open the hatch?
Brought her up, opened the hatch.
And then put her in. Okay. And then went down to Bella. Tell me what happened there.
She said what happened to Cece. Or she asked it was the same thing, the exact same thing that happened to me as Cece.
Did she ask you that? Okay. So Bella's pretty smart. How did she sound when she asked you that, Chris?
She had that soft voice she always had.
Yeah. And what exactly did she say?
She said exactly the same thing that happened to me as Cece. And then I said, I don't even remember what I said.
Okay.
I said if I just said yes, like a horrible person, or if I just put that blanket over her too and did the same thing.
Same blanket, same way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She said, no, Daddy.